Dean of Student Affairs and Alumni Relations, and I am pleased to welcome you to the second in a series of events we're hosting in recognition of Hunger and Homeless Awareness Week. And I am so excited to welcome our two special guests. But before that, I wanted to go over just a little bit of housekeeping. I do want to let you know that today's event is being photographed. I'm sorry, it's being recorded, not photographed. And there is a notice in the chat there that if you are uncomfortable with that, we are hoping that it won't prevent you from participating. But if there's any way that you would like to change your identity for those purposes, you're free to do that now. We also ask for purposes of our interaction this afternoon that you include your pronouns. And you can do that simply by clicking on the three dots by your name and selecting rename to make those changes as necessary. And we're going to get started. I'm going to introduce our very special guest. Lynn Lewis joins us today, and she describes herself as a lifelong community organizer and social justice worker who believes in the power and necessity of community members to collectively analyze their experience and to take direct action to win justice. She worked 17 years with Picture the Homeless, a grassroots homeless-led group in New York City, as the civil rights organizer and as executive director. She's also a founding member of the East Harlem El Barrio Community Land Trust, participated in the founding of the New York City Community Land Initiative, and served for 5 years as a founding steering committee member of Communities United for Police Reform. Other life experience includes living in revolutionary Nicaragua and spending significant time in Venezuela and learning from other community organizers outside of the United States. She will be joined today by Deborah Dickerson. Deborah Dickerson has nearly 26 years involvement with homeless and housing justice organizing, including marches, rallies, lobbying, surveying, speaking with elected officials on panels, press conferences, and the New York City annual count of street homeless. She has represented Picture the Homeless regarding homelessness in Canada, Germany, South Korea, and throughout the United States. She currently serves on the New York City Coalition of Continuum of Care Steering Committee of People with Lived Experience, on the East Harlem Community Land Trust Board, the Anti-Eviction Mapping Project, and the Picture the Homeless Oral History Project Advisory Board. She is also a chaplain and an ordained elder. And without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to our two panelists who will guide us through a presentation. We ask that you hold your questions until the very end so that they'll have time to finish their presentation. But if you have reactions or comments that you'd like to share in the chat, feel free to do so before then. So again, I welcome you all, and especially to our guests, Lynn Lewis and Deborah Dickerson.
So good afternoon. It's a time where there is obviously understatement, a lot going on. And I know everybody's very busy. And so to take an hour out of your day to reflect on not only the fact that our neighbors and people that are formerly our neighbors and people that we don't know in New York and all over the country and all over the world are hungry and don't have a home, I think is already right there a commitment to social justice and a commitment to finding solutions. And so thank you, Lynn Roberts, for always being a leader on these issues. And this first screen here, I have a short PowerPoint. I'll be playing some audio, so you won't only be bored by my voice. And of course, you hear from Deborah. But this is a banner from Picture the Homeless. And the solution to homelessness is a home. There are plenty of people who would counter that and say, oh, but people are mentally ill and people are, you know, have drug problems and what have you. But the reality is that people with homes have all those problems. The difference is that if you're homeless, you're also living in extreme poverty. The difference is that being homeless makes every problem that you already had so much worse. And so, sorry, I'm seeing this little admit people into the waiting room, so it was blocking what I was trying to see. Homelessness and hunger cannot be solved by social services or social workers. And clearly, when people need help, they need help. If you're hungry, a sandwich is going to keep you from being hungry for a minute, but it's not going to solve the problem of hunger. And so homelessness and hunger reflect systemic inequalities. Extreme poverty, as I mentioned, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, all the ways that we other people contribute to hunger and homelessness. And we use stereotypes, right, to make that seem acceptable. Just when people came from Europe and colonized the US, they had to make people sound like subhuman in order to justify their treatment. The same way that people who were enslaved Africans were kidnapped. We need to use negative stereotypes and stigma to justify the mistreatment of people. And so we see this around homelessness and hunger, that it's people's fault, that they're lazy, that they don't want to work. And so homeless folks are organizing to end homelessness and police harassment and a host of other issues. And charity alone is not justice. Picture the Homeless was founded in November of 1999 by Lewis Hagins and Anthony Williams. They both were homeless at the time, residents of Bellevue Men's Shelter. Being homeless, though, is not your entire identity. So Anthony and Lewis were many things besides being homeless. And one of the things they were social justice leaders who took the initiative to start an organization and say, this is wrong and we can do better. So since I left Picture the Homeless, I have been conducting an oral history of Picture the Homeless because I think the lessons learned there are applicable to a lot of social justice organizing that is being done and that we need to do and we need to grow. And one of the lessons from the Picture the Homeless Oral History Project is that being founded and led by homeless folks was one of the things that welcomed people into the organization. It's very different being a member of an organization that's homeless led than being a client of an organization where you're the recipient of services. And one of the main differences is power that you have within the organization. So the motto of Picture the Homeless is don't talk about us, talk with us. And that kind of extends into the oral history project. I'm going to play a couple of shorts for you that are on SoundCloud. And I think, there we go. And each piece has some silence in between, and you can just put in the chat box some reflection if you want to.
They're pushing us out. We don't make the money like they do. But I'm going to take what I got and I'm going to make it work.
Late at night, it's probably like 12, 1 in the morning, and he comes in my room and says, we got to call ourselves something now. I'm like, well, there's a coalition for the homeless. There's this organization. There's that. I didn't even know. I said, okay. So I'm walking back and forth. Oh, what about picture the homeless? He goes, what do you mean? I said, picture that person that you see every day. Picture what's going on. Picture the homeless. Picture the people. Understand who the people are. They're not just a photograph or a photo op. They're seeing the person. We're talking about picturing that person. He goes, oh, wow, I get it. Because I get it, Anthony. Okay, good. So he's got flyers up around the shelter now. And the shelter's up in arms. What is this? Who is these people? Who are these guys? And they start hearing us on the radio. So the word is out that there's this group of 2 guys out here that's talking about rights for homeless people. I remember Lewis telling me one time on the subway, after we named the organization already, he goes, that's for you, Anthony. It's not for me. Picture the homeless is for you. It's for you to talk to the Congress. It's for you to talk to government. It's for you to let them know about the homeless situation. This is new to me. It's the first time I've experienced it. Picture the homeless is for you. We're doing this together for you.
The issue of homelessness is such a compelling issue, such an ideological factor in the life of this country, because it exposed the direction this country is headed. And it exposed the kind of justification that exists, where people can see that the issue of homelessness and poverty are charity issues, that somehow the homeless are homeless because of their own indiscretion, that they are helpless, that's the reason why they're homeless, and that they can't think for themselves, they can't speak for themselves, they can't fight for themselves, they can't organize, and they can't lead, not just themselves, but the country.
My first impressions of Picture the Homeless, I saw it as a necessary group. I saw it as on the cusp, because as Harlem was becoming more and more gentrified, gentrification and homelessness both seem to be increased. It's no accident that those 2 things increased at the same time. And I heard a need for intelligent, planned responses to the displacement of people that was happening because of gentrification. Gentrification is something that, from my church work, I understood some of the evils of gentrification and the mercenary base that was a cause of gentrification, and speaking out against the profit-minded realtors. That's something that I saw as part of, it's a necessary thing. It's part of what I thought, we're commanded by God to do, to speak out against the evil, and that evil profiteering that was being done by the landlords. I saw that as necessary. I didn't see enough people being organized. There were disparate voices, but I didn't see enough people being organized into one voice until I was reading, some of what Picture the Homeless, some of what Anthony and Lewis had done, were saying, because that was the coming together of united voices against the gentrification, against the profiteering, against the elite landowners, and if you want to call it the municipal land barons. That was part of what was being done by Picture the Homeless, in many ways better than anyone else was doing it. So I said, this is something I see, I understand, and I agree with. And that's what would have drawn me to Picture the Homeless, to their meetings, and then eventually to 116th Street.
The Warren Squad.
Yep, sorry. So I can share the link because there's a lot more there, but just to give you a sense of it. There we go, sorry. So I want to ask Deborah now if you'd like to share. Deborah is a longtime leader of Picture the Homeless and one of the many voices that that you heard in the series of shorts. So Deborah.
Hello, everyone. It's indeed a pleasure being here. And yes, I have been with Fit to the Homeless since 2005, and it has given me a lot of opportunities. One, I got the great opportunity to speak with Dr. Roberts when in being at Hunter College, when we would go with some of our other members, and I was terrified. And one thing, being in the classroom and listening to some of the graduates, that students that were there, I was like, this is okay, this is fine, because people need to know that because you're homeless does not mean that you do not have the intelligence or the know-how, or you can't be taught and to learn how to get your messages across about this injustice. Homelessness is not something pretty. It is a very gray area that can happen to one in life. And being that we have this pandemic, we're going to have a lot of people that cannot pay their rent, and their families that are going to have to go places and give up their homes and stuff. So it's not something that you just take lightly. I say if if your name is not on the lease, you are considered homeless. And a lot of people don't look at that because, they say, oh, well, I'm staying with someone. But if the management or whatever, they come in and they see that you're not on the lease, then they have the right to try to tell you to leave. But we have been giving lessons and going different places and speaking at council meetings and rallies and protests, and gotten the opportunity to go to a couple of countries out of the United States and across across the United States and the world. And it's been a really lovely experience. And on this clip, you see me here where we did our first count. We did a count called, it was called vacancies. And this picture right here is the beginning of that vacancy, which is 205, that was in front of the state building. And Lynn, I can't think of his name, Lynn and Sam, they all said, you're going to speak in a press conference. I never did it in my life. So, I did that, and it was just really interesting. And that was at that particular time, that was the Manhattan Borough Scott Stringer, which now is the controller. So we keep our heads together. This was another time, which was happened to be 11 years later, talking about some of the vacant properties that we had said. They told us we couldn't do it and we weren't able. We said there are enough properties in it was at that time, it was just Manhattan, but now we did all the 5 boroughs. There's enough empty buildings if you would take them and revamp them, and you would be able to house people that are homeless. So, I mean, to me, it's very, very important. And 11 years later, some of those buildings are still standing, and that was right there in East Harlem. And at this particular time, I am on the board for East Harlem Community Land Trust, El Barrio. So I'm very happy to be there. We are in the process as we speak of closing for phase 1 for Community Land Trust. And Community Land Trust does work. It's there to help preserve low income and also for homeless people. So we have 4 buildings that I'm very happy. 2 of the buildings we are have some tenants and they're getting ready to relocate them and make the buildings, bring them up to par. If we take those buildings and start fixing up, we can stop this housing crisis that we have. But of course, you know how our developers and realtors are, and those that want to make these, I call them greedy landlords, these deals. So Harlem has changed. Brooklyn, I live, has changed. Queens, Staten Island, all of the 5 boroughs have changed building luxury apartments. And now we have a crisis where homeless people, because they are in congregate settings, they have to be out. They can't stay there. And congregate settings mean they're more than one person there. I have lived in the shelter and worked in the shelter. So I basically know what it's about. And being that I had Picture the Homeless to give me some information and to be able to speak, and I'm very humble and grateful to talk about, let's help homeless people. If you give us a chance, we will be able to get back on ourselves, to get back into the community, to be able to start things, to be able to be, we are productive people. And that's the thing that I like about Picture the Homeless. And this oral history is just fascinating. And everybody has history, but this talking about the history of a homeless organization, which happens to be grassroots, is just so phenomenal. And I'm very humble because it's given me opportunities to go into other countries and to speak, going on for a peace mission. Last month, I also was able to be on a panel to talk with the UN, with one of the NGOs, talking about homelessness, talking about how do we get our communities back? How do we get about, some young ladies was on there and they had no food, they were orphanage. And this is what you call hunger and homelessness. The two combinations are very, very detrimental to anyone. And homeless and housing is a human right. So it's time to get our families back and to get some of the homeless people off the street. They're not people just bums or trying to commit crime or everything. Some of them are the working poor and they don't make the money like others do.
Deborah,
Yes,
thank you. Are you passing the baton back?
yes, I am.
I'm so moved, every time I hear you talk, it's so moving. I'm kind of sitting here with that feeling. So, one of the things about oral history is that, like any kind of history is not about the past, right? History is about what has happened in the past, so we can learn how it affects our present, how it shapes our present. And then we can use that understanding to use our power to shape the future. And so the Picture the Homeless Oral History Project, and bouncing off Deborah bringing the pandemic into this space. So in the spring, when it was clear that COVID-19 was here in New York and we needed to socially distance to survive, the city, as Deborah mentioned, has over 70,000 people in the shelter system on any given night. That's not the total number of people who are homeless, because it doesn't count people who are doubled up. It doesn't count people in illegal housing. It doesn't count people in the domestic violence shelter system. But regardless, there were massive shelters where people were not able to socially distance. And the street outreach workers are being told by the city to not give out hand sanitizers and really life-saving materials to kind of force people to go into shelter. And a lot of people were saying, no, I'm not going into shelter. And so Homeless Can't Stay Home was founded during the early days of COVID-19 here in New York. And I'm going to bring up their website. We were actually very involved with Homeless Can't Stay Home, and a picture of the homeless housing campaign leader, Marcus Moore, who was street homeless, sleeping on the train, actually became one of the people who said, I'm not going into a shelter. Like, that's a death sentence. If we're supposed to socially distance, how am I going to lay on a cot, less than 2 feet away from someone else who's coughing? And so this website, Homeless Can't Stay Home, was created by a bunch of homeless folks and advocates who came together and said, look, people should have their own empty hotel room with their own bathroom to live. And at that time,
Lynn,
there were
I don't think
100,000.
Excuse me, Lynn, I don't think we're seeing that
Oh,
site.
okay.
Yeah.
Let me figure that out. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Thank you for your help. How about now?
Are you using the new share feature to select that window?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Doesn't seem that we're able to see it.
Uh-oh. Okay. Well, I will put it in the chat. Homeless Can't Stay Home. Hashtag Homeless Can't Stay Home. And basically, there were a couple different things that were going on. There was emergency legislation to force the city to place people in hotel rooms. And that's on an emergency basis. But there was also the knowledge and the drive to create permanent solutions. So there's the chat. There's the website there, so everyone will have that. I don't want to waste a lot of time messing around with this. If you scroll down, there are interviews with people who were street homeless and are part of this campaign. And some of you may have heard about the Upper West Side, that neighbors filed a lawsuit to remove, mostly it's homeless men, in a hotel called the Lucerne, because they said that their presence, the mere presence of homeless people in this hotel was ruining their quality of life. Yet the fact that they were in that hotel with their own rooms was perhaps saving their lives. And so it just is a really painful illustration of how this stigma and negative stereotypes actually dehumanizes our fellow human beings. And so there's a whole bunch of interviews on this website. There's ways to get involved today because this is still going on. We all know that the caseload, COVID cases are rising again. So this isn't over. This campaign isn't over. And now I'm going to try to share one that Deborah has been involved with, and hopefully that will work. Can folks tell me what you see? Do you see the PowerPoint again?
Yes, I do.
Yes, we see the narratives of displacement and resistance.
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. So Deborah, could you share some things about the anti-eviction mapping project?
Yes. This is another, I call it baby of mine that I'm so happy in being involved. And one of the things I can say, even myself as being very active and being very organizing and speaking out, I went through an eviction process. And being on the continuum, they didn't know that. And I had an eviction. So with this anti-eviction mapping project, they have different individuals. We have people from Chicago, Washington, Portland, Oregon, San Francisco, Oakland, which has a very, very huge problem. And LA is number one when it comes down to getting people, it's a lot going on. So in this project, with this group of people, we decided what they did was that they decided to come together from the East Coast to the West Coast to really look at the patterns and the neighborhoods and where people were being evicted. And you can look and to see the different colors. The reds is where you have the most people being evicted, and they started to really document everything that was going on in the different cities, and some of them and the ways in which people were being pushed out. And it is one sense a form of it is one sense a form of gentrification and displacement, because they want those buildings and they want them. So they start doing all kinds of tactics and things, and people were literally being pushed out and given evictions. Some evictions were not legal. So they started to look at the methodologies in which some of the landlords and the developers that they were doing, and the court systems and how they were doing. So we had like a little forum here in New York City, and Rob Robinson and the anti-eviction, and we showed the different places thanks, Lynn, showed the different places in where people were being evicted. And it was just really astonishing. And the neighborhoods and what you see, the different dots there that are going on, those are the different places in which there is a large percentage of people being evicted out of their apartments. And some of them, the other thing is that you also have your older people, your seniors, they were also being evicted out because they wanted to go up on the rent and everything. And they had no place, so they can't pay the rent, they're on fixed incomes, and it's very devastating. So we looked at all the 5 boroughs, and again, we meet quarterly and we have these discussions about what's going on with this anti-eviction. And the purpose of it is to show people, to give people knowledge and information. You need to know this is what's going on. And they do have a website. I don't have it with me, but they do have a website. You can go on there talking about the anti-eviction mapping project, and they can show you the different places where people are being evicted. So this knowledge also, if people are being evicted, it also ties in with homelessness. So they, it's information that's very, very useful. And we need to let people know, hey, they're doing this, and these are the areas and the counties and the cities that's just going on.
So the blue dots, if you hover over them, this project also combines oral history and like massive data analysis, because as Deborah said, each of these red dots is an eviction, but each eviction is a person or a family. And so if you hover over the blue dots, here I pulled up Deborah's, because not only is she part of planning this project, she's also somebody who's been evicted. So it includes her story. If anybody here is listening who's been evicted or concerned about being evicted, the Anti-Eviction Mapping Project also publishes like the worst landlords in New York City. They're working very closely with a lot of advocacy groups. And I think that this is another amazing example of partnerships between organizers, people that are tenants who are at risk of being evicted or who already have been evicted and are homeless, people who are able to create maps and analyze this kind of data, because we all don't have all of those skill sets. And then working with advocates to pass legislation to protect people and give people more rights as tenants. I'm going to pull up the slideshow again. There's another project out on the West Coast, because homelessness is national. And so we have to pay attention to what's happening around the country. And so the Western Regional Advocacy Project is, I'm trying to pull this one up. Some of these slides I'm having.
If you put it on slideshow, it might work better.
Yeah, I'm trying to get this to go to the link. So the Western Regional Advocacy Project is a kind of a, I won't say coalition, but it's an alliance of a bunch of different grassroots organizations led by homeless people around the country. And let me know if that pops up. Do you see house keys, not sweeps?
Not yet.
It'd be better to try to share what you're, or switch what you're sharing currently. If you switch to your whole desktop, we'll certainly be able to see it.
Okay, not sure. Do you see it now?
Not yet.
John, if I put it in the chat, can you do it?
Sure, yeah.
So we don't waste people's time. So just to share a little bit more about what's happening around the country. So just like Picture the Homeless, a homeless-led group, there are, oh, I shared it to Lynn alone. There are organizations around the country that are led by homeless people, that are started by homeless people. And so one of the things about Hunger and Homeless Awareness Week is that it's really beyond charity. We're talking about justice. And by justice, we mean, as Deborah said, housing is a human right. And so there are groups all over the country of people who don't have homes, who are unhoused, undomiciled, homeless, and people use different terms for that, who are organizing. So in the short segments that we played, you heard a lot about, you heard the word organizing a lot, which basically means that people who are affected by any issue are identifying solutions and fighting for those solutions. Because as you saw in the photos with Deborah, there's a photo of her with Scott Stringer, and then there's a photo of her 11 years later with Scott Stringer talking about the same thing. So now, can we see wrap now?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a short video that I thought would be interesting for people to see. And we often don't. So if, John, I think, could click on that. This will tell us a little bit about these campaigns. I think there's sound that we have to turn on.
Where is your compassion? Where's your discretion? They have nowhere to go.
In the dehumanization, marginalization, and yes, elimination of populations of people.
We're asking for Mayor Hickam to stop the sweeps immediately. Stop the sweeps! Stop the sweeps!
Instead of helping us find more sources where we can get help, they take the little bit of help that we do have.
You sweep trash. You don't sweep human beings. Human beings. Human beings.
Clear out those homeless camps in downtown Denver.
Cleaning up a homeless encampment near Home Depot.
The sweeps are designed to have the illusion of progress when all we're doing is depriving individuals who have next to nothing their right to exist at all.
Did you get that cop carrying that bike, by the way? Okay, that's a police stealing private property.
There's 11 laws on the books as soon as you stop walking. Anything you do at that point is illegal.
All in all, is when the cops do these sweeps, people get stressed out. Because you have to get your stuff moved within an hour or less than that.
These guys, these officers here, are taking my stuff and they're throwing it away. Everything I own, stealing my stuff, which they say you can go get back in the DPW yard, which you never get back.
Disbanding the clear out those
Cleaning up. Being clean up.
Shutting down towns at sunset and making it illegal to sleep in your car on public property or spending a night in the park.
We've got 1,400 people on the streets in Sacramento with no place to sleep at night.
We don't have enough beds in the shelters.
And that's why we say services, not sweeps.
Shadows are full, the empty lots are full, and folks need access to human services and transportation.
You want to do it, we're going to tell people we don't want any more evictions, we don't want any empty houses. We want to put people in every empty house in Portland, and we want to protect that right and make Portland a sanctuary city for housing justice.
They're just going to come in and just bulldoze your stuff, and so you kind of panic.
Pushed here in May, May 15th, matter of fact, May 15th, and it hasn't even been 4.5 months, and now they're pushing us again.
You don't give me any solutions. Rehouse Oakland, because that's what's really going on. We need to rehouse the people that were here before.
Government, in the best of circumstances, is about making choices. Choices have consequences. Consequences have faces and names.
I could never be replaced. My mom photographs and the letters.
All your sentimental items are gone. Anything that people have to recognize you are gone.
Have it packed up and on the move, then they'll take it.
My grandmother, we all got an urn, a necklace, and we put some of his hair, some of his beard, and some of his ashes in it. And that was in the very first backpack they took.
DBW is the main face that you'll see taking your stuff.
Besides paying for my medication, that I think they should, because, I mean, where am I going to get the money for my medication?
Every time I go down to their yard, they don't ever have my stuff.
Like, we need them to, like, feel this pain and feel this anger and feel, this hope to want them to stop.
The city of LA is being sued by a group of homeless people and their advocate. They are suing the city for the unlawful seizure and destruction of property belonging to homeless people during outreach sweeps.
And then the times that you do go and occupy a public space, you feel like you gotta sneak and creep around. Right? You can't rest when you want to rest. You can't get all the rest that you want to rest because you always gotta wake up. You got the police, and more police. I'm General Dogon. That's who I am. You a sergeant. Yeah.
When people see what a sweep actually looks like, they see people's belongings being thrown into the back of a dump truck as if they were trash. They see people being arrested for saying to the police, "Why are you doing this? I got nowhere to go." Like they did to Therese Howard in Denver for documenting what they were doing. Not even being one of the ones being swept, for documenting the fact that they were treating human beings this way, because they knew damn well that Denver Homeless Out Loud would make sure that that got out to a much broader network.
But I'm a general. Yeah, so you respect my shit. Yeah.
Homelessness is not a result of individual behavior pathology. It is part and parcel the result of systemic inadequacies and injustices that pervade every aspect of our economic and political system.
No car, no phone, no way to move your stuff. Where do you go? Yeah. Where do we go?
This is a federal responsibility to ensure that people in the United States have a decent place to live that they can afford. And we now spend $54 billion a year in 2004 constant dollars less on affordable housing than we did before the homeless crisis kicked in the early 1980s. Restore that funding, look at the cause and effect of eliminating that funding, and you'll see the numbers of homeless people go way down, because we all know nothing ends homelessness like a home.
I said to them, I told them this, I will move in a heartbeat if you come here and say to me these words, I have a place for you to go.
We're asking for Mayor Hickam to stop the sweeps immediately. Stop the sweeps! 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 Stop the sweeps!
Thank you, John.
Way to help.
IT help. That's the best. So I wanted to share that video because in New York, we're part of an 11-city initiative, Stop the Sweeps NYC. And what I really want folks to know, and then we'll go to Q&A, is, as Deborah mentioned, housing is a human right. But if you don't have a home, you have to be somewhere. And so as you see people, you know, I see people walking around all the time who are sleeping on the sidewalk. There's more and more of this. There's an estimate of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of people at risk of eviction. New York City is the only place in the country with a right to shelter. But during a pandemic, a shelter is not what is going to keep you alive. And so you see the collaboration between the police removing people and throwing their belongings away, often Department of Sanitation involved, and a shelter system that is inadequate. A shelter system manages homeless people, but it does not end homelessness. And so with that, I guess I'll need to get my screen share back, and we'll go for questions.
So everyone is welcome to unmute if you'd like to ask a question, or you can type it into the chat and I will feed the questions to Lynn and Deborah. And if it's not a question, it can be a comment, a reflection. A lot of information has been shared. A lot to take in. So there's a question from Kitten. This is great. What is the best way to get involved in local projects? And I'll just ask Kitten to clarify by local that you mean New York City? Yes. So what are ways to get involved in New York City?
Homeless Can't Stay Home has a website and is actively working on the issue of keeping people in hotels and not closing the hotels and forcing people back into congregate shelters. And congregate means many people staying on cots in one room where you can't socially isolate. And so one of the, other benefits of putting homeless folks in hotels is that it keeps those hotel workers employed. It keeps those hotels open. I know I'm not the only one seeing for rent signs everywhere all over as I walk around. Picture the Homeless has a website as well. I'll type both of those in. And then Stop the Sweeps New York City is actively doing surveys. And we have an online training for people that want to do surveys. And I'll also type in that email.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Can I just say that Louis Hagens, the Picture the Homeless co-founder who has passed, his brother has joined us on this workshop.
Okay.
Hi, Brock.
Hey, Lynn. I hope I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hey, I just posted a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, Brock, I see it. Thank you. Would you like me to read it or would you like to share it yourself?
You can read it.
Okay, so, and thank you for joining us. What can small homeless ministries do to bring attending to this problem in and around the Trenton, New Jersey area?
I meant attention. Sorry about
attention to. Now that's quite all right.
Yes, because we have a small ministry, and what we've been doing in probably the last couple of years, we've been collecting items, hygiene items, and food items, and put them in backpacks, and going out in the Trenton area and giving out to people who are low income and people that look like they were homeless. And we need ideas, more ideas to do more. We're small, but we need to do more things to bring more attention to this this tragic situation.
Well, small is good. You know, Louis, your brother, and Anthony started Picture the Homeless. So wonderful things always have to start somewhere.
Right.
You know, Brock, one of the things, you know what I heard on the news last night, not just to Brock, but you know, this nexus of media stereotypes is just so evil, right? And so last night on the news, there was a segment about guardian angels going into the subway platforms and looking for mentally disturbed people. But then they mentioned homeless, and then they said they were going to call upon Department of Homeless Services to do their job. And so there's this conflating, and the journalists doing the reporting didn't push back at all on this kind of conflating homeless people with mentally deranged people who were violent. And so one of the things I think is really powerful, and as a faith-based group, you all have this certain moral authority that comes with that, is engaging with local media to provide like coverage of, you know, how do people become homeless in Trenton? What's the situation with the rents in Trenton? How many people are at risk of eviction? I could share with you the surveys, the Stop the Sweeps NYC surveys that we're doing.
Sounds
and
good.
I'll share those with you. And then we kind of modified them, but it's in alignment with the groups that RAP is working with, primarily on the West Coast and Texas, so that we can start to get a picture that homelessness isn't just an individual person with a problem who can't deal with keeping a roof over their head, but that it's community-wide and it's nationwide. So I could share those with you. And then Deborah, do you have any suggestions?
Yes, I also belong to a faith initiative at the Brooklyn Borough President's office, and I know Manhattan has another interfaith program that they have where they go and they give out. One thing that is important is having those the masks and hand sanitizers. That is so important because people don't have that. And a friend of mine, she goes to, you can go to the park. There are parks that you can go to. Some of them are not wanting to go into the shelter system, go into the park. And if you see them gathering there, you put them in like little sandwich bags or bag and you give them out. They also need socks. Socks are also very, very important. Are important, and my friend also, she goes out and she sees them there and they give out like food. You meet them and you go and you give out food and you kind of connect with them. Sometimes people need to know, what do you need? Is there something that you need? If it's possible, even just talking to them, saying, how are you doing? That's so important, because we don't do that one-on-one. Now we got scared because we have to keep the social distance, but also asking, are you okay? Even giving them information on where to go to get tested, because that's also important, to know where to go to become tested. People are now beginning to give food out, not sitting down, but they can go and give food out, and just trying to connect with, I know here in New York, they have, what is it, it's in Harlem, the Black social workers, getting connected and saying, how can we help in this way? Or is there someone that can be a liaison person, a liaison? That's so important. And when Lynn said about talking about homeless people being in mass transit has they also have their outreach, but are they doing anything? No. So maybe you can talk about the transportation. How are they helping or getting connected with mass transit, so that they can find out if there's a liaison person, what are they doing? And saying, well, I see this person there. Can y'all go out and try to give them some kind of assistance?
Yeah, finding out what the policies are. So in Trenton, I'm sure there's hotel rooms. I mean, there's just, as much as some people want to insist on traveling and doing things right now during the pandemic, a whole lot of people aren't. And so what is Trenton's policy around, street homeless folks and the folks they do have in shelter? Are they able to socially distance? One of the challenges that we heard from street homeless folks in New York is the lack of bathroom access. So remember, like all these restaurants and places closed down. And so the little bit of places that people were able to go to use the bathroom and even wash their hands closed down. And so what are the policies that Trenton has right now for street homeless folks and for people in congregate shelters in terms of these hotel rooms? That also could be something to find out, because often we don't even know what the city's policies are. And, is it your city council that makes that decision? Is it the mayor's office? And finding out and meeting with them.
Well, I know in the Mercer County area, there's a few motels around that house homeless people. There's been a couple church groups that go around and bring food to them, to our homeless brothers and sisters. But the problem is, at least what I understand in the Mercer County area, it's going to get worse, because a lot of these small businesses that employed people, like diners and small stores, with this COVID thing, a lot of those closed down. So it's increasing the problem. It's going to increase the problem. And even in Princeton, I found out that, excuse me, there's a dinky station right at Princeton University, and they allow people that don't have shelter to stay in there at night, but then they chase them out in the morning. There's a couple places in Trenton, because I talked to the lady head of social services right during this outbreak, and she was saying, in Princeton, New Jersey, and she was telling me they're not doing anything because they're afraid. There's a couple spots in Princeton. They're afraid to catch the COVID if we go out there and help the homeless. So, I mean, that stigma is still there.
Yeah.
And that's one of the problems, that stigma itself. With the COVID, and you add that with the COVID, it just makes it worse. You know what I mean? And when we was walking around Trenton, they have a rescue mission down in Trenton, and they let mainly as males, and they let the males stay in there at night, but then they chase them out in the morning, and there's a soup kitchen right behind the police station, and they're feeding people down there. But I think that mostly they're feeding them outside because of this COVID. I mean, the effects of COVID is kind of like pouring gasoline on a fire. If I'm making myself clear on this homeless situation. So, so that's one thing that we are looking to meet with Catholic Charities, because right now nobody's hardly doing anything because of COVID, because of that fear of contracting a disease until they've come out with some kind of vaccine or something. It's kind of putting everything on freeze around here, at least in the Mercer County area.
Well, thank you, Brock, for sharing your experience on the other side of the river. We have a lot of resources that have been shared here in the chat. I don't know if you're able to view them, but I think there are examples where people are doing things. And if any of that is helpful, we can also share these links to everyone who came, who RSVP'd and who was able to join us. And even those who were not able to join us, we will share all of these resources and links. Also, one of our attendees, I don't know if she's still with us, Amrit Samra, yes, also shared a link to some resources. And Amrit, I don't know if you want to share anything about them, if they're local, if they're New York, or if they're more broad than that. Not sure where you are located in the world.
Sorry, I don't think I sent anything.
Oh, Amrit, I'm sorry. They.
I'm from the UK.
From the UK, ah.
I've actually attended a few different talks on homelessness and things, and it's been quite interesting to see different.
Are those global resources? Well, maybe not, but it probably is something, you know, we can learn from people all over the world about how to address these issues. And I know that both Lynn and Deborah have consulted with and strategized with folks from many parts of the world. And again, this is a local to global issue, and it, you know, to address the root causes, we have to listen to those who are most impacted and learn from them and let them lead, something Lynn said at the very beginning. So again, I want to thank all of you for joining us. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I wish we had more, but we will want to keep in touch. I want to thank our guests, Lynn Lewis and Deborah Dickerson. Please know that they are at the forefront of this movement, but are joined by many, many others. And I hope that you will join them in their efforts. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you all. Stay safe, please.
I wish everyone to stay safe and healthy, and to enjoy your holidays, however you celebrate them.